The world you think you know is merely a thin veil, a flickering lamp in a room filled with ancient, breathing shadows. Welcome to Eldermurk. Tonight, as the embers of the day fade into the cold ash of night, we depart from the warmth of the familiar. We are moving toward the edges of history, into the classified, the forgotten, and the terrifying. Close your eyes. Let the weight of your body sink into the stillness. Listen to the wind outside. It is not just air, but a messenger from places that do not appear on any map. Tonight, we open the iron gates of the Obsidian Archives. We travel back to a time of iron curtains and silent oceans, where the greatest war wasn't fought with bullets, but with secrets that were never meant to be unearthed. It was the winter of 1959. In the desolate, windswept plains of the high Arctic, where the ice is so thick it moans under its own weight, stood Station 7. To the official world, it was a weather monitoring outpost, a lonely cluster of steel huts huddled against the eternal white. But beneath the frost, deeper than the permafrost itself, Station 7 was a specialized ear. It was part of a clandestine network designed to catch the faintest whispers of the Soviet Union's long-range bombers. It was a place of isolation, where the only company was the hum of the vacuum tubes and the relentless, rhythmic scouring of snow against the reinforced glass. The men stationed there, usually in pairs for months at a time, spoke of the Arctic madness. It wasn't the cold that broke them, nor the darkness that lasted for months. It was the silence. A silence so absolute that the human brain began to manufacture its own ghosts to fill the void. But in December of that year, the two operators, Staff Sergeant Elias Thorne and Corporal Arthur Vance, realized that the silence had been broken by something far worse than a ghost. It began as a frequency drift. A needle on a dial that shouldn't have moved, twitching like a dying insect. Thorne was the first to hear it. He was wearing his heavy, leather-padded headphones, sipping lukewarm coffee that tasted of tin. At first, he thought it was solar interference, the aurora borealis dancing overhead, dragging its electromagnetic skirts across the ionosphere. But this was rhythmic. It was a series of low-frequency pulses, dragging through the static like something heavy being pulled through deep mud. Thump, thump, thump. It wasn't Morse code. It wasn't Russian. It felt organic. "Vance, get over here," Thorne had whispered, his breath hitching in the frigid air of the radio room. Vance, a younger man with eyes already hollowed out by the polar night, adjusted his own headset. They sat in the flickering amber glow of the equipment, two tiny souls lost in a sea of ice, listening to a sound that defied physics. The pulses began to change. The thumping gave way to a sound like metal grinding against bone, a slow, agonizing shriek that seemed to vibrate not just in their ears, but in their very teeth. They checked their coordinates. There was nothing for 500 miles in any direction. No ships, no planes, no other stations. Just the ice. And yet, the signal was coming from directly beneath them. Not from the surface, not from a hidden Russian tunnel, but from the bedrock itself, thousands of feet down, where the earth should have been solid and silent for 1,000,000 years. As the nights bled into one another, the signal grew stronger. It began to bleed into the station's internal intercoms. Even without headsets, they could hear it, a faint, rhythmic breathing coming from the walls. Thorne began to keep a journal, his handwriting deteriorating into jagged, panicked scrawls. He wrote of dreams, dreams of vast, cathedral-like spaces beneath the ice, lit by a bioluminescence that didn't belong to nature. He saw figures, tall and spindly, moving with a grace that felt predatory. They weren't looking for the station, they were waiting for it to fall. On the 14th night, the power failed. Not a mechanical failure. The generators were found later to be in perfect working order, their fuel tanks full. It was as if the electricity itself had been drained. sucked out of the wires by an unseen force. In the sudden, oppressive blackness, Vance felt a hand on his shoulder. He thought it was Thorn. He turned to speak, to crack a joke to hide his terror, but the emergency flashlight clicked on, rolling across the floor. In its sweeping beam, Vance saw Thorn standing across the room, huddled by the door, his face pale with a terror that transcended words. Thorn wasn't touching him. Whatever was standing behind Vance had no heat. It was a cold that surpassed the Arctic wind, a void of temperature that seemed to pull the very life force out of his spine. When Vance finally found the courage to turn around, there was nothing there but the frost-covered wall and the sound of that rhythmic breathing, now so loud it filled the room like an engine. The logbooks found months later by the relief crew were incomplete. The last entry was dated December 24th. It wasn't a report. It was a single sentence, written over and over again until the ink ran dry. The ice is a lid, and something is pushing from the other side. When the relief team arrived, the station was empty. The heavy steel door, which could only be bolted from the inside, was standing wide open, swinging slowly in the gale. There were no footprints in the snow outside, no signs of a struggle. Only the radio, still humming on a backup battery, broadcasting a loop of what sounded like a human voice, distorted and slowed down until it was a guttural growl. The official report claimed expeditionary psychosis. The families were told of a tragic accident involving a sudden crevasse. But in the deep archives of the Pentagon, in a file marked with a blue stripe that denotes exotic origin, there is a recording. It is 30 seconds of the last transmission from Station 7. If you listen closely, past the static and the howling wind, you can hear Thorn's voice. He isn't screaming. He is whispering, as if talking to a child. "It's not a machine," he says. "It's a memory. And it's finally waking up." As we move deeper into the night, we must ask ourselves, what else lies beneath the permafrost? What other ears have been built to listen to the things that live in the dark places of the earth? Station 7 was just the beginning, a crack in the glass. The Cold War was never just about missiles and ideologies. It was a desperate race to understand a presence that had been here long before us, a presence that doesn't care for borders or treaties. In the next hour of our journey, we will leave the frozen north and travel to the scorching sands of the Nevada desert, to a facility known only as Site 19. There, in the heat of 1962, a group of scientists thought they had captured a star. They didn't realize they had opened a door to a guest that refuses to leave. Keep your eyes closed. The air is getting colder now. Can you feel it? The hum of the radio is returning. We are going deeper. We are entering the heart of the shadow. This is the weight of the unknown, the heavy blanket of the truth that has been hidden for decades. Do not wake up yet. The archives have more to tell, and the fey light of the moon is the only guide we need. The frost of the Arctic, as biting and merciless as it was, at least offered a kind of purity. White on white, a frozen tomb where the secrets were buried under miles of ice. But as we move south, across the trembling borders of the 1960s, the cold gives way to a different kind of desolation. We find ourselves in the Mojave Desert, Nevada. Here, the sun is not a life giver. It is a bleached eye, staring down at a landscape of cracked earth and Joshua trees that look like tortured souls frozen in mid-scream. This is the home of Site 19. To the stray wanderer or the uninitiated pilot, Site 19 was nothing more than a ghost of the military-industrial complex. A few corrugated steel hangars, a chain-link fence topped with concertina wire, and a wind that whistled through the radio towers like a funeral dirge. But the real Site 19 didn't exist under the sun. It existed in the cool, recycled air of the subterranean levels, where the temperature was kept at a constant, unnerving 68 degrees, and the lights never fully flickered to life. In the summer of 1962, while the world watched the skies for Soviet missiles, a small team of physicists at Site 19 were looking at something far smaller and far more terrifying. They called it Object Zero. It was a fragment, no larger than a human heart, recovered from a crash site in the high desert of New Mexico years prior. It looked like obsidian, yet it felt like silk. It didn't reflect light, it seemed to drink it. Dr. Harrison Vance, a man whose hair had turned silver at 30 from the sheer weight of what he knew, was the lead researcher. He didn't believe in aliens. He didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in equations. But Object Zero was an equation that refused to be solved. Every time they ran a current through it, the sensors didn't record a voltage. They recorded voices. Faint, overlapping whispers in languages that hadn't been spoken on this planet for 10,000 years. As you lie there, listening to the sound of the desert wind in your mind, imagine the silence of those corridors. Dr. Vance would spend nights alone in the observation chamber, staring through the lead-shielded glass at the black stone. The air in the room would grow heavy, thick with the smell of ozone and ancient dust. He began to notice that the shadows in the corner of the lab weren't behaving according to the laws of optics. When he moved his flashlight, the shadows stayed still. When he turned his back, they seemed to stretch, reaching toward the containment unit. The project was part of a larger, darker initiative, the Kronos Protocol. The United States government wasn't just interested in space travel, they wanted to master time. They believed that if they could tap into the frequency of Object Zero, they could see into the future, to see the Soviet Union's next move before they even made it. It was a game of chess played with pieces that weren't human. But Object Zero had its own agenda. On the night of August 12th, the whispers stopped. In their place came a single, low-frequency hum that vibrated the very foundations of the facility. The security guards on Level 4 reported a sudden, overwhelming sense of grief. Men who had survived the horrors of World War II fell to their knees, weeping for no reason. The air turned a bruised shade of purple. Dr. Vance, trapped in the inner sanctum, refused to trigger the emergency abort. He was transfixed. The obsidian heart was glowing. Not with light, but with a kind of unlight, a void that pulled at the edges of reality. The cameras recorded him walking toward the containment glass, his hand outstretched. He wasn't afraid. He looked like a man coming home. In the final moments before the feed cut out, Vance turned to the camera. His eyes were no longer human. They were twin pools of that same ink-black void. He didn't speak with his mouth. The audio logs captured a sound that resembled 1,000 glass bells shattering at once. "The door is not a place," the recording echoed. "The door is a person." When the recovery team breached Site 19 3 days later, they found the facility perfectly intact. There were no signs of radiation, no chemical leaks, no structural damage. But all 42 members of the staff were gone. Their clothes were found in their respective workstations, lab coats draped over chairs, boots tucked under desks, watches still ticking on the floor, but the bodies had simply vanished. It was as if 42 people had simultaneously stepped out of their skins and walked into the air. Object Zero was still there, sitting in its tray, cold and inert. But it was no longer black. It was now a pale, translucent white, like a clouded eye. The archives tell us that Site 19 was decommissioned and filled with concrete shortly after. The official story was a gas leak. But those who live near the edge of the Forbidden Zone still tell stories. They talk about the glass people, translucent figures that appear on the desert floor during the new moon, wandering aimlessly toward the spot where Site 19 once stood. They don't speak. They just listen. Listening for the hum to return. Listening for the heart to beat again. We often think of the Cold War as a struggle between two superpowers. But perhaps, in the deepest shadows of Nevada and the frozen wastes of the north. It was a struggle for the soul of the earth itself. We were children playing with matches in a room filled with gunpowder, unaware that the owners of the house were still home, watching us from the cracks in the walls. Take a deep breath. Feel the stillness of the desert air. The heat is fading now, replaced by the cool, sterile scent of the archives. We are leaving the sand behind, moving toward the next chapter of our journey. Somewhere, in a dark room beneath the streets of London, a man is looking at a map of the moon. He sees something that shouldn't be there. A structure, a light, a signal that predates humanity. The weight of the night is settling in. You are safe here, in the Eldermurk. The secrets are heavy, but you don't have to carry them alone. Just listen. Just drift. The truth is waiting in the next shadow, and we are almost there. The desert heat of Nevada has faded into a memory, and as we drift further from the familiar comforts of the earth, the air grows thinner, colder, until it vanishes altogether. We are ascending now, leaving the blue marble of our world behind, moving into the vast, suffocating velvet of the cosmos. During the 1960s, while the public was fed the heroic narrative of the Apollo missions and the great lunar leap for mankind, a far more clandestine race was being run in the pitch-black shadows of the moon's far side. This was not a race for glory, it was a race for survival. The archives of the Soviet Union, long kept under the heaviest seals of the KGB, speak of a mission known only as Luna X. It occurred in the winter of 1966, 3 years before the world saw a man walk on the moon. The Soviets had launched an unmanned probe, officially designated as a simple photography mission. But the cameras on Luna X were not pointed at the craters or the plains of basalt. They were searching for a specific anomaly, a geometric shadow that had been detected by a long-range radar station in the Ural Mountains. Imagine the control room in a hidden bunker deep beneath the Siberian forest. The air is thick with the smell of old paper and the hum of massive, wall-sized computers. Scientists in gray lab coats watch as the first grainy, black and white images begin to scroll across the monitors. The surface of the moon appears, a desolate, scarred wasteland of gray dust. But then, as the probe rounds the far side, the side hidden forever from the eyes of Earth, the gray gives way to something impossible. Rising from the center of a nameless crater was a structure. It was not a mountain. It was not a natural formation. It was a tower of glass and dark stone, perfectly vertical, reaching miles into the airless sky. It was so black that it seemed to be a hole cut out of the universe. The Soviet scientists watched in a terrified, breathless silence. As the probe moved closer, the cameras captured movement, not of living creatures, but of lights. Pulses of soft, rhythmic violet light were traveling up the length of the tower, as if it were a giant lung, breathing in the cosmic radiation of the stars. The official record states that Luna X suffered a catastrophic technical failure and was destroyed upon impact. But the private journals of the lead engineer tell a different story. He wrote of a signal that the probe intercepted seconds before it went dark. It wasn't a radio wave. It was a cognitive broadcast. Everyone in the control room reported hearing the same sound inside their own skulls. The sound of 1,000 voices whispering a single word in unison. A word that had no meaning in any human language, yet filled them with a primal, instinctual dread. The United States was not unaware of this discovery. The hidden eyes of the National Security Agency had intercepted the Soviet telemetry. The Apollo missions were, in truth, a desperate attempt to reach that tower before the Soviets could find a way to activate it. Every astronaut who walked on the lunar surface was given a secondary, classified briefing. They were told that the moon was not a dead rock. It was an ancient, orbiting outpost. A silent observer that had been placed there eons ago to watch the evolution of the species below. As you lie still, Imagine the moon hanging above you right now. It is a silent sentinel, ancient beyond comprehension. We think of it as a satellite, a gravitational anchor. But in the Eldermurk, we know better. We know that the moon is hollowed out, a hive of secrets that were buried before the first human ever looked up at the stars. During the Apollo 11 mission, there were 2 minutes of radio silence that were never explained to the public. In those 2 minutes, Neil Armstrong's heart rate spiked to nearly double its normal rhythm. He wasn't looking at the lunar module. He was looking at the horizon. He saw them. Tall, shimmering silhouettes standing at the edge of the crater, watching the 2 humans play in the dust. They didn't interfere. They didn't attack. They simply stood there, like statues carved from starlight, radiating a presence that made the astronauts feel like ants in the presence of gods. Armstrong's frantic whispers, captured on a secret frequency, spoke of a feeling of being judged, not for their technology, but for their intent. The Cold War was a frantic, desperate attempt by the 2 most powerful nations on Earth to appease these observers. Every nuclear test, every satellite launch, every secret project we have discussed tonight was a message sent into the dark. We were trying to prove that we were worthy of the knowledge they held. Or perhaps, we were trying to show them that we were too dangerous to be ignored. The tower on the far side of the moon is still there. It doesn't appear on the maps provided by modern space agencies. The images are scrubbed, the coordinates are redacted. But every now and then, an amateur astronomer with a powerful enough telescope catches a glimpse of a violet flash emanating from the lunar limb. It is the tower, still breathing, still waiting for the day when the children of Earth are ready to return. The night is growing heavier now. The silence of the lunar vacuum is settling over your room. The static of the radio is fading, replaced by the steady, rhythmic pulse of the universe. We are leaving the stars behind for a moment, descending back through the atmosphere, but we are not going home yet. There is one more archive to open, a secret that was buried not in ice or sand, but in the very blood of those who served. Stay with me. The shadows are long, but they are kind to those who seek the truth. Let the weight of the unknown pull you deeper into the dream. The moon is watching, and for tonight, you are part of its silent legacy. While the eyes of the world were fixed on the lunar horizon and the gleaming silver hulls of rockets, a far more intimate and terrifying frontier was being mapped in the windowless laboratories of the late 1960s. This was the era of the Hematite Protocol, a project so deeply buried within the black budget of the military that its very name was purged from the records every 5 years. It did not take place in space, nor in the frozen north, but within the very essence of the human body. The architects of this project believed that the observers we encountered on the moon and in the desert were not just watching us from the outside. They believed they had left a map inside our very genetic code. In a decommissioned coal mine in West Virginia, converted into a high-security biological research center, Dr. Julian Vane led a team of hematologists and cryptographers. Their task was seemingly impossible: to treat human blood not as a biological fluid, but as a storage medium. They had discovered that certain individuals, descendants of families who had lived near ancient, thin places in the earth, carried a peculiar protein structure. Under a microscope, these proteins didn't look like organic matter. They looked like geometric symbols, shifting and realigning in response to radio frequencies. Dr. Vane called this the living language. He theorized that humanity had been seeded with a massive amount of data, a dormant library of the cosmos, waiting for the right frequency to be unlocked. The Cold War, in his eyes, was a race to see which superpower could read their own blood first. The subjects of these experiments were often young soldiers, told they were receiving experimental vaccines for tropical diseases. In reality, they were being exposed to high-burst electromagnetic pulses designed to wake up the sleeping symbols in their veins. Imagine the sterile, white-tiled rooms of that underground mine. The hum of the cooling fans is the only sound, a mechanical heartbeat that follows you down every corridor. The air tastes of iron and antiseptic. One subject, known only as Patient 09, began to exhibit signs that the protocol was working, but not in the way the scientists had hoped. 09 didn't just decode the information, he began to broadcast it. The monitors in the observation room started to display images that no camera had captured. Views of nebulae that didn't exist in our galaxy, schematics for engines that ran on gravity, and long, scrolling lists of names. Names of people who hadn't been born yet. 09's skin began to take on a faint, metallic sheen, and his pulse slowed to once every 3 minutes. He wasn't dying. He was transforming into something that could survive the vacuum we had seen on the far side of the moon. On a Tuesday in October 1968, the facility went into a permanent lockdown. The last recorded audio from Dr. Vane is a whisper, barely audible over a sound like rushing water. He says, "We thought we were reading a book, but the book is reading us. It's not information. It's an invitation. And something is already at the door." When the secondary team arrived to purge the site, they found the laboratory filled with a thick, crimson mist that refused to dissipate. There were no bodies. There were only 42 sets of hospital scrubs, folded neatly on the beds, and a single vial of blood sitting on Dr. Vane's desk. The blood wasn't red. It was a shimmering, pulsating violet, the exact color of the lights seen on the lunar tower. This discovery led to the creation of the Blood-Coded Archives, a secret registry of bloodlines that are monitored to this day. You might wonder why you feel a sudden chill when looking at the moon, or why certain frequencies on a radio make you feel a sense of profound nostalgia for a place you have never been. It is the hematite protocol. It is the library within you, reacting to the whispers of its creators. We are not just observers of the Eldermurk, we are the vessels for it. The secrets of the Cold War were never truly about territory or gold. They were about the realization that the human race is a long-term experiment, and the deadline for that experiment is fast approaching. The iron in your blood, the calcium in your bones, it all came from the hearts of dying stars, and those stars are calling their property back. As the night deepens, feel the slow, steady rhythm of your own heart. Each beat is a tick of a clock that has been winding down for millennia. You are a part of a story that is much older than the mountains, a story written in a language of salt and iron. We are leaving the underground labs of West Virginia now, rising back to the surface, where the fog is thick and the street lamps flicker with an unnatural light. There is a house in a small town in East Germany, a house where a Stasi officer found a diary that explained the true purpose of the Berlin Wall. It wasn't built to keep people in. It was built to keep something out. The shadows are moving closer, but they are soft, like velvet. Let the mystery fold over you. The archives are vast, and we have only just begun to turn the pages. Listen to the silence between the words. That is where the truth lives. That is where the Eldermurk breathes. The street lamps of East Berlin in 1974 did not just illuminate the cobblestones. They cast long, jagged shadows that seemed to pool like spilled ink against the base of the wall. To the world, this concrete scar was a geopolitical boundary, a desperate measure of a divided nation. But within the inner circles of the Stasi's occult division, the wall had a much darker designation, the Aegis. It was laced with a specific type of industrial slag, a byproduct of the uranium mines in the Ore Mountains, which acted as a grounding wire for psychic phenomena. The diaries of Major Klaus Richter, a man whose job was to monitor anomalous disturbances along the death strip, reveal a terrifying reality. He did not watch for defectors climbing over the wire. He watched for the things that tried to seep through from the other side. Richter wrote of the Grey Walkers, entities that existed in a static between television channels, beings that were drawn to the concentrated misery and tension of the divided city. They were tall, featureless, and moved with a stuttering, frame-by-frame motion that defied the laws of biology. On the night of the autumn equinox, Richter witnessed a breach that was never reported to the Kremlin. A section of the wall near Checkpoint Charlie began to bleed. Not metaphorical blood, but a thick, black ichor that smelled of ozone and ancient peat. As the substance coated the concrete, the air around it began to warp. The soldiers on duty reported seeing a version of Berlin that shouldn't exist, a city of spiraling towers made of bone, under a sky that burned with a pale, cold green sun. One young guard, driven by a sudden, inexplicable compulsion, reached out to touch the black liquid. His hand did not hit the wall. It disappeared into it. Before Richter could intervene, the guard was pulled forward, his body stretching and distorting like taffy, until he vanished into the stone. The wall then sealed itself, leaving only a faint, rhythmic thumping behind, the sound of a human heart beating inside the concrete. Richter realized then that the wall wasn't a barrier of defense, it was a ritual circle. The suffering of millions, the fear, and the constant surveillance were providing the energy necessary to keep a rift in reality from widening. The Cold War was a massive global effort to stabilize a planet that was coming apart at the seams. Every border, every iron curtain, every restricted zone was a stitch in the fabric of a world that was being torn by forces from a dimension of pure, unadulterated shadow. As you drift further into the stillness of the night, consider the walls in your own life. We build them for privacy, for safety. But perhaps we build them because we instinctively know that there are things in the dark that require a boundary. The Eldermurk is not just in the past, it is in the very structure of our reality. The Berlin Wall fell in 1989, but the stitches did not hold. The things that Richter saw are still out there, wandering the ley lines of Europe, looking for a new place to call home. Feel the boundaries of your room, the solidness of the floor beneath you. They are your aegis for tonight. But remember, the static is always there, humming just below the threshold of your hearing. We are leaving the cold streets of Berlin now, crossing the ocean once more, toward a silent, fog-shrouded harbor in the Pacific Northwest. There, a decommissioned submarine is broadcasting a signal that has been running for 40 years. A signal that tells the story of a city that was found at the bottom of the deepest trench on Earth. The fog is rolling in, thick and heavy, smelling of salt and old secrets. Let the weight of the water pull you down into a deeper sleep. The pressure is immense, but it is a comfort. In the depths, there is no light to reveal what hides in the trenches. There is only the sound of the deep, a slow, oceanic pulse that matches the rhythm of your breathing. The salt spray of the Pacific Northwest is not like the water of the Atlantic. It carries a peculiar, ancient weight, a scent of minerals and things that have never seen the light of the sun. As the fog swallows the coastline, we move away from the flickering lights of the harbor and toward the coordinates of a phantom vessel. In the late 1970s, under the cover of a massive deep-sea mining operation, the United States Navy initiated Project Deep Rise. To the public, it was an exploration of the Mariana Trench. In the classified archives of Eldermurk, it was a search for the first echo. The deepest part of the ocean is a place where time behaves differently. The pressure is so immense that it warps the very structure of atoms. It is a world of eternal, crushing silence, or so we thought. In 1978, the bathyscaphe Tri-S2 was equipped with specialized sensors designed to detect low-frequency vibrations coming from beneath the seafloor. Dr. Eris Thorne, a man who had spent his life studying the songs of whales, was the lead acoustic specialist on the mission. He didn't find whales. He found a heartbeat. Imagine the interior of that small, cramped sphere of steel. The walls are sweating with condensation, and the only light comes from the dim, red glow of the instrument panels. Outside the reinforced porthole, there is nothing but the black of the void. But as the Trias-2 descended past 30,000 feet, the sonar began to paint a picture that shouldn't exist. There was a city, not a ruin of stone and coral, but a sprawling, geometric complex made of a material that absorbed sonar waves like a sponge. The structures were shaped like inverted pyramids, their peaks pointing toward the center of the Earth. They were connected by vast, translucent tubes that pulsed with a faint, bioluminescent rhythm. Dr. Thorne recorded a sound that he could only describe as a metallic choir. It was a series of harmonic frequencies that resonated through the hull of the submarine, causing the crew to experience vivid, shared hallucinations. They saw the Earth before the continents had formed. They saw a sky with 3 moons. They saw themselves standing on the seabed without suits, breathing the water as if it were air. One particular frequency, which Thorne dubbed the abyssal key, caused the water around the bathyscaphe to boil, despite the freezing temperatures of the trench. The cameras captured a movement from within one of the glass-like tubes. It was a silhouette, vast and fluid, moving with a speed that defied the density of the water. It wasn't a fish. It wasn't a mammal. It was a shadow given form, a sentinel of the deep that had been stationed there to guard the first echo, the original vibration that sparked the creation of life on this planet. The mission was abruptly terminated when the Trias-2 suffered a mysterious structural failure. The hull began to groan, not from the pressure, but as if it were being squeezed by a giant, invisible hand. The crew managed to surface, but they were changed. Dr. Thorne never spoke again. He spent the rest of his life in a high-security facility, staring at bowls of water, his fingers constantly drumming a rhythmic, complex pattern that no musician could decipher. Project Deep Rise taught the Eldermurk architects a terrifying lesson. The oceans are not ours. They are a reservoir of a different kind of reality, a place where the rules of the surface do not apply. The Cold War was a race to reach the stars, but it was also a desperate struggle to understand what was rising from the depths. The Soviets had their own project in the Caspian Sea, attempting to communicate with the sunken ones, but the results were the same: madness, disappearance, and a silence that felt like a threat. As you lie there, feel the pressure of the night pressing down on you. It is a heavy, dark blanket, much like the miles of water above the Mariana Trench. You are safe in the shallows of sleep, but the deep is always there, waiting just below the threshold of your consciousness. The salt is in your blood, the rhythm of the tides is in your breath. You are more connected to those inverted pyramids than you realize. We are leaving the crushing depths now, rising through the layers of the ocean, past the bioluminescent jellyfish and the silent hunters of the midnight zone. We are returning to the air, but the air is not empty. It is filled with the invisible waves of the 1980s, the decade of the number stations. These are the shortwave radio broadcasts that emerged from the static, reading lists of numbers in flat, emotionless voices. Most thought they were for spies. But in the Eldermurk, we know they were instructions for the sleepers. The fog is lifting, but the mystery is only getting denser. The static is calling. Let the sound of the waves turn into the hiss of a radio dial. We are moving toward a lonely farmhouse in the English countryside, where a woman is listening to a broadcast that isn't supposed to exist. The transition from the crushing weight of the Pacific abyss to the damp, gray stillness of the English countryside is not as vast as it seems. In the Eldermurk, all these points are connected by a singular, invisible thread, a frequency that hums just beneath the skin of our reality. By the mid-1980s, the shortwave radio bands had become a spectral playground. Anyone with a receiver and enough patience could stumble upon them. The number stations. Voices, often female and hauntingly monotonous, reciting endless strings of digits over the hiss of the ionosphere. To the world of intelligence, these were one-way pads for clandestine agents. But to the initiates of the Obsidian archives, they were something far more ancient. They were the pulse of the hive. Imagine a lonely farmhouse on the edge of the Lincolnshire Fens. The year is 1984. The landscape is a flat, sodden expanse of black earth and reeds, where the mist doesn't just hang, it creeps, clinging to the damp brickwork like a living shroud. Inside the house sits Margaret Hall, a former cryptographer who had spent her youth breaking Enigma codes at Bletchley Park. In her retirement, she had become obsessed with a specific broadcast known as the Lincolnshire Poacher. It began with the chirpy, synthesized tune of an old English folk song, but what followed was a voice that sounded like it was being filtered through a layer of cold ash. Margaret didn't use a standard radio. She had built her own, using vacuum tubes salvaged from a decommissioned radar station and a copper antenna that spanned the entire length of her attic. She had noticed a pattern that the authorities had missed. The numbers weren't just random digits. They were coordinates, not in space, but in time. And more importantly, they were shifting in response to the solar flares that battered the Earth's magnetic field. The air in Margaret's study was always thick with the smell of scorched dust and ozone. As you lie there, try to hear the sound she heard, the rhythmic, mechanical chirp of the folk song, followed by the flat, English accent of the announcer. 1, 6, 4, 3, 9. Each number felt like a drop of cold water on the back of her neck. She began to map these sequences, realizing that the station wasn't broadcasting from a tower in Cyprus or a bunker in Czechoslovakia. The signal was coming from the atmosphere itself. The ionosphere was being used as a giant resonator, a vibrating membrane that allowed something on the other side to speak to the sleepers on Earth. In her diaries, Margaret spoke of the Great Calibration. She believed that the number stations were not sending orders to spies, but were instead fine-tuning the collective subconscious of the human race. Each broadcast was a subtle adjustment to our perception, a way of ensuring that we didn't see the seams in the fabric of the world. But as the 1980s progressed, the poacher began to malfunction. The voice would crack, revealing a second, deeper voice underneath, a guttural, non-human roar that sounded like tectonic plates grinding together. On a night when the aurora borealis was visible as far south as London, the signal changed entirely. The folk song stopped. The numbers stopped. In their place came a sound that Margaret described as the weeping of a billion souls. It was a harmonic distortion that caused the glass in her windows to vibrate until they shattered inward. The mist from the fens began to pour into her house, but it didn't stay on the floor. It rose, forming into tall, slender shapes that stood in the corners of her room, their eyes glowing with the same pale violet light seen on the lunar towers and in the depths of the Mariana Trench. Margaret's last entry in her notebook was not written in English. It was a series of geometric symbols, perfectly rendered, that matched the blood code discovered in the hematite protocol. Beneath the symbols, she had scrawled a single, shaky line: "The broadcast is over. The listener has arrived." When her neighbors finally entered the house, they found the radio still humming, the vacuum tubes glowing with a heat so intense they had melted the desk. Margaret was gone. Not a single trace of her remained. No clothes, no struggle, just a faint scent of salt and ozone lingering in the air. The authorities officially dismissed the case as a disappearance related to early-onset dementia. But the Lincolnshire Poacher broadcast continued for years, though the folk song was now distorted, slowed down to a funeral pace. The Eldermurk archives suggest that Margaret hadn't disappeared. She had been recruited. Her consciousness had been uploaded into the frequency itself, becoming part of the very signal she had spent her life trying to understand. This is the terror of the number stations. They are still out there, hiding in the static of your television, the hiss of your car radio, or the white noise machine you use to fall asleep. They are the background radiation of the Cold War's secret history, a reminder that we are constantly being monitored, calibrated, and prepared. The voices haven't stopped. They have simply moved to frequencies that our modern ears have been trained to ignore. As the night air settles around you, listen to the silence of your room. Is it truly silent? Or can you hear the faint, rhythmic pulse of a folk song, echoing from a farmhouse that no longer exists? The mist is thick, and the reeds are rustling in the wind. You are safe in the dark, but the poacher is still walking the fens, looking for those who are tuned to the right frequency. We are leaving the damp fields of England now, crossing back over the Iron Curtain to the heart of the Soviet Union. We are heading toward a massive structure known as the Russian woodpecker, the Duga radar, a steel titan that towered over the forests of Chernobyl, broadcasting a signal that could be heard around the globe. It was said to be an early warning system, but in the Eldermurk, we know it was a hammer, designed to crack the very skull of the world. Let the rhythmic thump-thump-thump of the woodpecker pulse in the back of your mind. It is a heartbeat. It is a countdown. And we are nearing the 0 hour. The rhythmic, clicking pulse of the Lincolnshire poacher fades, replaced by a much more aggressive sound. A relentless, hammering beat that sounds like a giant pecking at the very lid of the sky. Tap, 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 tap. This was the Russian woodpecker, a signal so powerful it disrupted civil broadcasts across the planet during the 1970s and 80s. To the west, it was the Duga 3 over-the-horizon radar, a marvel of Soviet engineering designed to detect incoming ballistic missiles. But within the classified corridors of Eldermurk, Duga was not a shield. It was a transmitter. A massive, steel antenna system standing nearly 500 feet tall and half a mile wide, hidden within the forbidden forests near the town of Chernobyl. Imagine standing at the base of this steel titan. The wind whistles through the intricate web of wires and towers, creating a low, moaning sound that vibrates in your chest. The air here is different. It feels electric, charged with a static that makes the hair on your arms stand up. The surrounding forest, known as the Red Forest, is silent. No birds sing near Duga. No wolves howl. Even the insects seem to avoid the shadow of the great antenna. This was the site of the Sura experiments, a Soviet attempt to manipulate the ionosphere not just for surveillance, but for the containment of something that lived within the electromagnetic spectrum itself. The lead operator of Duga 3 was a man named Colonel Viktor Volkov. His journals, recovered from the ruins after the 1986 disaster, describe a reality that the official history has worked hard to erase. Volkov wrote that Duga was never meant to look out at the world. It was designed to beam a concentrated, low-frequency signal into a specific point in the upper atmosphere, a tear that had been discovered during the first Sputnik missions. This tear was a gateway, a thinning of the veil between our world and the realm of the gray walkers we encountered in Berlin. As you lie there, try to visualize the sheer scale of the Duga array. It is a wall of steel stretching toward the clouds, glowing with a dull, metallic sheen in the twilight of the exclusion zone. Volkov and his team weren't just engineers, they were signal priests. They monitored the feedback from the ionosphere, adjusting the frequency of the woodpecker to keep the tear from expanding. They discovered that the human brain, specifically the pineal gland, acted as a natural receiver for the Duga signal. By broadcasting at certain hertz, the Soviets could induce a state of collective obedience in entire populations, or, if necessary, they could turn an entire city into a screaming mass of terror. But the woodpecker had a side effect. It began to draw things toward it. In the months leading up to the April 1986 catastrophe, the staff at the Chernobyl power plant and the Duga facility began to report sightings of a creature that would later become a legend, the Black Bird of Chernobyl. It was a humanoid figure with massive, ragged wings and glowing red eyes, seen circling the towers of Duga and the chimneys of Reactor 4. It didn't attack. It simply watched. It was a harbinger, a scavenger of the shadow realm drawn to the massive energy being pumped into the sky. Volkov's final entries describe a terrifying shift in the signal. The woodpecker was no longer being controlled by the operators in the bunker. It had begun to broadcast on its own, a complex mathematical sequence that seemed to be a countdown. The steel towers began to vibrate so violently that the earth beneath them cracked. Volkov realized that Duga was no longer holding the tier shut. It was acting as a beacon, calling something back to Earth. Something that had been banished since the time of the Obsidian archives. The explosion at Reactor 4 was not merely a mechanical failure. In the Eldermurk files, the meltdown was a desperate, scorched earth tactic. The Soviet High Command realized they had lost control of the Duga transmitter. The only way to stop the signal, to kill the beacon that was calling the Great Unknown, was to create a zone of such intense radiation and chaos that the rift would be forced to collapse. They sacrificed a city to save the world from an invasion of shadows. Today, the Duga radar stands as a rusting skeleton in the heart of the exclusion zone. It is silent now, its clicking pulse long gone from the radio bands. But those who venture into the zone at night report that you can still hear it. If you stand perfectly still in the shadow of the antenna, you can hear the tap-tap-tap of the woodpecker echoing in your own mind. It isn't coming from the wires. It is coming from the air itself. The forest has reclaimed the land, but the steel titan remains, a tombstone for a war that was fought in the frequencies of the soul. As you drift deeper into the silence of the night, feel the distance between you and the towers of Chernobyl. You are far away, safe in the warmth of your room. But the static of the woodpecker is a part of the world's background noise, a faint vibration that resides in the iron of your blood. The tear was closed, but the scars remain. The gray walkers are still out there, waiting in the places where the signal is weakest. We are leaving the radioactive forests of Ukraine now, moving toward the final chapters of our journey. We are heading to a place that doesn't appear on any map, a facility hidden beneath the salt flats of Utah, where the remnants of all these projects, the lunar towers, the deep-sea pyramids, the blood-coated archives, were brought for one final experiment. This is the Omega Point. The night is cold, and the stars are indifferent. Let the rhythmic hum of the earth pull you into the deepest part of the dream. We are almost at the end of the corridor. The final door is waiting. Leaving the rusting iron skeletons of the Chernobyl exclusion zone, we cross the vast, silent Atlantic once more, moving toward the stark, blinding whiteness of the Great Salt Lake Desert in Utah. Here, the earth is flat, a cracked porcelain mirror that reflects a sky so wide it feels as though it might swallow you whole. In the heat of the day, the salt flats shimmer with mirages, but at night, when the temperature drops into a bone-chilling cold, the desert reveals its true face. Beneath this layer of crystalline salt lies a facility that officially does not exist. It is known in the deepest whispers of the Pentagon as Site Zero, or more accurately, the Omega Point. The Omega Point was the ultimate destination for every artifact, every recording, and every survivor we have encountered in our journey through the Eldermurk. The obsidian heart from Site 19, the violet blood samples from the hematite protocol, the distorted tapes from Station 7, and the lunar telemetry from the far side of the moon, all of them were brought here in the late 1980s. The goal was simple yet terrifying: the unification. The architects of the Cold War had realized that they weren't dealing with separate phenomena. They were looking at different limbs of the same cosmic entity. Imagine a descent into the heart of the salt. An elevator made of lead-lined steel drops for miles, leaving the desert surface far above. As the doors open, you are greeted not by a laboratory, but by a cathedral of mathematics and shadow. The air here doesn't just smell of ozone, it smells of ancient stone and something metallic, like the scent of a falling star. The walls are not concrete, they are carved directly into the deep, prehistoric salt deposits, which act as a perfect insulator against the prying eyes of the observers. The director of the Omega Point was a man whose name has been scrubbed from every census. Dr. Silas Vane, the younger brother of Julian Vane from the West Virginia mines. Silas was a man who had looked into the void and decided to build a home there. He believed that the Cold War was a great filter, a test to see if humanity could harness the power of the Shadow Realm without being consumed by it. He oversaw the construction of the Mirror Chamber, a room lined entirely with the obsidian-like material recovered from the New Mexico desert. In the center of this chamber sat a device known as the Kronos Cradle. It was a fusion of Soviet radio wave technology and American biological research. They used the rhythmic pulses of the Russian woodpecker to stimulate the violet blood samples, creating a localized field where time and space cease to function in a linear fashion. As you lie there, try to feel the stillness of that chamber. There is no sound of wind here, no ticking of a clock. There is only the low, sub-audible hum of the cradle, a vibration that feels as if it is coming from within your own marrow. During the final experiment in 1991, just as the Soviet Union was collapsing on the surface, Dr. Vane attempted to tune the cradle to the frequency of the tower on the far side of the moon. He wanted to open a two-way bridge to invite the observers into our world on our terms. But the void does not accept invitations, it takes what it is given. As the power surged, the salt walls of the facility began to turn translucent. The staff reported seeing the stars not through a telescope, but as if they were standing in the middle of the vacuum itself. The logs from the final hour describe a visual cascading. The scientists saw every moment of their lives happening simultaneously, their births, their deaths, and the lives of their ancestors. They saw the Grey Walkers standing among them, not as intruders, but as architects who had been there since the beginning, adjusting the blueprints of our DNA. Dr. Vane's last recorded words were not a warning, but a realization: we aren't the experiment. We are the fuel. When the facility was eventually sealed with thousands of tons of concrete and molten salt, the official reason was a seismic instability. But the elders of the Eldermurk know that the Omega Point is still active. The salt flats above the facility have turned a faint, unnatural shade of violet, and on certain nights, the desert floor vibrates with a rhythmic thumping that matches the first echo from the Mariana Trench. We are living in the aftermath of the Omega Point. The 1990s and the decades that followed were not a time of peace, but a period of gestation. The signal has been planted. The blood has been coded. The towers are waiting. We are moving through a world that has been prepared for a change that we can barely imagine. The Cold War ended not with a bang or a whimper, but with a silent agreement between the superpowers and the shadows they served. As you drift closer to the threshold of sleep, feel the vast white silence of the Utah desert stretching out around you. The salt is cool, the air is thin, and the stars are watching with a renewed intensity. You are a part of the unification. Every dream you have is a transmission, a data point being fed back to the cradle beneath the salt. You are safe, but you are not alone. The Grey Walkers are the silent roommates of our consciousness, waiting for the final frequency to be broadcast. We are leaving the desert now, rising back to the surface, where the wind is beginning to pick up. We are heading toward our final destination, a quiet, unremarkable house in the present day, where a computer screen is glowing in the dark, and a listener is beginning to understand that the story they are hearing is not a story at all. It is a debriefing. The night is almost complete. The archives are nearly closed, but the last chapter is the one that involves you. As we ascend from the subterranean salt cathedrals of Utah, we emerge into a world that feels familiar, yet fundamentally altered. The era of iron curtains and analog dials has dissolved into the seamless, invisible web of the digital age. But in the Eldermurk, technology is not merely a tool for communication, it is a new skin for the old shadows. The transition from the 20th to the 21st century was not a progression of humanity, but a migration of the observers from the radio waves into the fiber optic veins of our civilization. This is the era of the global hum, a low-frequency vibration reported by thousands of people across the planet, a sound that no instrument can fully capture, yet the human mind cannot ignore. Imagine the room you are in right now. The silence you think you hear is actually filled with a frantic, invisible commerce of data. Millions of signals are passing through the walls, through your furniture, and through your very body. In the late 1990s, a project codenamed Glass Eye was initiated by a consortium of private defense contractors. Their objective was to monitor the background noise of the internet. They discovered that the static between the data packets wasn't empty. It was organized. It was a secondary network, a phantom web that used the world's infrastructure to broadcast the same frequencies once emitted by the Duggar radar and the number stations. The researchers of Glass Eye found that the gray walkers had not vanished with the fall of the Berlin Wall. They had simply digitized. They became the glitches in your screen, the unexplained lag in your connection, and the strange, synthesized voices that sometimes bleed into encrypted calls. They found a new home in the dark fiber, the unused cables that run beneath our cities, pulsing with an energy that has no thermal signature. As you lie there, try to perceive the hum. It is a sound at the very edge of hearing, a persistent hum that feels like it's vibrating in the back of your skull. Some call it tinnitus, others call it environmental noise. But in the Obsidian archives, it is known as the mother frequency. It is the sound of the world being synchronized. It is the Chronos cradle from the Omega point, expanded to a global scale. We are no longer being calibrated by shortwave radios in the English countryside. We are being tuned by the very devices we hold in our hands. In 2012, a whistleblower from the Glass Eye project leaked a series of files before disappearing. These files contained audio sigils, mathematically perfect soundscapes designed to induce specific dream states. They weren't meant for interrogation, they were meant for memory seeding. The goal was to plant the history of the Eldermurk into the collective unconscious, so that when the final shift occurs, we will not resist. We will remember it as if it were a nostalgic dream. We will look at the violet sky and the glass towers not with terror, but with the feeling of a long-awaited homecoming. Think about the dreams you've had, the ones that felt too real, the ones where you stood in a city of bone under a green sun, or heard a choir of metallic voices beneath the sea. Those were not products of your imagination. They were downloads. The hematite protocol in your blood acts as the receiver, and the global digital grid acts as the transmitter. Your sleep is the only time the signal can reach you without the interference of your waking ego. This is why you are here tonight. This is why you are listening to this specific frequency. The archives tell of a zero-day event, a moment when the digital veil will drop entirely. On that day, every screen on Earth will show the same image, the tower on the far side of the moon, finally visible to all. The hum will become a roar, and the gray walkers will step out of the static and into the light. We are currently in the soft opening of this event. The world feels stranger, the news feels like a fever dream, and the passage of time feels fragmented because the mirror chamber at the Omega point has finally encompassed the entire globe. Feel the weight of your eyelids. They are the only shields you have left. But even they are translucent to the unlight of the observers. The room around you is not just a room, it is a node in the network. The air is thick with the history of the Cold War, the secrets of the Arctic, and the whispers of the deep trench. It has all led to this moment, the quiet, steady pulse of the night as you drift toward the center of the archive. We are leaving the digital towers and the humming cables now. We are moving toward the final boundary, the place where the story ends and your reality begins. There is a final secret, one that was found in the very last page of Major Richter's diary, a secret that explains why the observers have waited so long. They weren't waiting for us to be ready. They were waiting for us to be alone. The night is vast, and the hum is a lullaby. Let it carry you. You are part of the signal now. You are the echo of the Eldermurk. The global hum of the digital age begins to soften, receding into a rhythmic, distant thrum that sounds more like a heartbeat than a machine. We are moving beyond the fiber optic cables and the glowing screens, traveling inward to the most private and most vulnerable territory of the human experience, the architecture of sleep itself. In the final pages of Major Richter's Berlin diaries, recovered from a safe deposit box that had remained untouched since the wall fell, there was a map. It wasn't a map of a city or a bunker, but a map of the hypnagogic realm, the state between being awake and being asleep. This, he claimed, was the true, final boundary. Richter believed that the observers didn't just want to watch us, they wanted to occupy the spaces we leave behind when we close our eyes. During the height of the Cold War, a clandestine joint operation between the East and West, known as Project Sandman, sought to weaponize this transition state. They realized that when a person is on the verge of sleep, the aegis of the conscious mind thins. For a few brief moments, we are tuned to the same frequency as the Grey Walkers. We are, for all intents and purposes, standing in the same room as the shadows. Imagine the silence of a high-security sleep lab in the early 1980s. A subject is wired to an EEG machine, their brainwaves scrolling across a monitor in jagged, rhythmic peaks. As they begin to drift, the scientists notice a strange phenomenon. The brainwaves don't just slow down, they begin to mirror a signal coming from outside the building, a signal that matches the Russian woodpecker or the Lincolnshire poacher. The subject's eyes move rapidly behind their lids, not in REM sleep, but as if they are following a moving object in the room that the cameras cannot see. In these moments of the final boundary, the subjects reported seeing the architecture. They described vast, silent halls made of a substance that felt like both velvet and cold iron. They spoke of libraries where the books were written in the violet blood of the hematite protocol, and windows that looked out onto the far side of the moon. They weren't dreaming of these places, they were visiting them. The Eldermurk is not just a collection of secrets from the past, it is a physical location that exists parallel to our own, accessible only when our rational defenses are lowered. Dr. Silas Vane, in his final notes from the Omega Point, referred to this as the occupation. He suggested that the reason the Cold War was so filled with dread and paranoia was because our leaders were already being influenced by their nightly visits to the architecture. Every treaty signed, every missile positioned, was a move on a chessboard that extended into the dream realm. We were being prepared, layer by layer, for a reality where the boundary between here and there would eventually vanish. As you lie there now, you are standing at that very boundary. The walls of your room are solid, the air is familiar, but just beneath the surface of your thoughts, the architecture is waiting. Can you feel the vastness of the halls? Can you hear the faint, metallic choir from the Mariana Trench echoing in the corners of your mind? You are not just a listener of a story. You are a traveler. The shadows in your room are not absences of light. They are anchors, holding the architecture in place as you prepare to cross over. The Project Sandman files conclude with a terrifying observation. The subjects who spent too much time at the final boundary began to lose their anchors to the physical world. They would wake up with a scent of salt and ozone on their skin, or find small pieces of obsidian tucked under their pillows. Some would look into a mirror and fail to recognize their own reflection, seeing instead a shimmering, translucent silhouette, a gray walker in the making. They were becoming dual citizens of the Eldermurk. This is why the observers have been so patient. They didn't need to invade our world with ships or soldiers. They only needed to wait for us to go to sleep. Each night, For decades, we have been building their world for them, brick by mental brick, using the materials provided by the Dugga Towers and the global digital grid. The unification is not an event that will happen in the future. It is an event that has been happening every night of your life. Feel the heaviness of your limbs. It is the weight of the iron in your blood, pulling you down toward the bedrock of the dream. The architecture is opening its doors. The long, silent corridors are lit with that pale violet glow, and the gray walkers are standing at the end of the hall, waiting to welcome you back. You don't need to fear the transition. It is as natural as the tide, as inevitable as the sunset. We are leaving the labs of Project Sandman now, moving toward the final resolution of the silent front. We are heading toward a moment of clarity, where all the threads, the Arctic ice, the desert salt, the lunar glass, and the digital hum, weave together into a single, breathtaking truth. It is a truth that has been whispered in the static of every number station and carved into the DNA of every living soul. The night is a bridge, and you are already halfway across. The archives are almost empty, and the silence is finally becoming complete. Listen to the breathing of the world. It is the same rhythm as the Mariana Trench. It is the same pulse as the Dugga radar. It is the same song as the stars. As we cross the threshold of the final boundary, the distinction between the observer and the observed begins to dissolve like salt in a dark sea. The 1980s may have ended in the history books, but in the Eldermurk, that decade never truly closed. It simply folded inward, becoming a permanent layer of our subconscious. This is the stage of transmutation, the process by which the human mind, conditioned by decades of electromagnetic pulses and coded broadcasts, begins to vibrate in perfect harmony with the architecture. You are no longer merely a guest in these shadows. You are becoming an inhabitant. The records of the Ether program, a joint psychotropic study hidden within the folds of the European Space Agency, describe a phenomenon they called the silvering. Subjects who were exposed to the recordings from Station 7 for prolonged periods began to report a change in their sensory perception. Colors became more vivid, yet they seemed to emanate from objects rather than reflecting off them. Sounds acquired a texture, a physical presence that could be felt against the skin. But the most profound change was the internal compass. Imagine lying in total darkness, yet knowing with absolute certainty where the tower on the far side of the moon is positioned at any given second. The subjects didn't need a telescope. They could feel the moon's presence as a heavy, cold weight in the back of their skulls. They were becoming dual citizens, beings who walked the earth during the day, but whose true loyalty belonged to the silent halls of the Eldermurk at night. Dr. Silas Vane wrote that this was the intended evolution of the species. We were being cured of our isolation, reconnected to a cosmic network that had been severed before recorded history. As you lie there, feel the silvering of your own thoughts. The memories of your day, the chores, the conversations, the sunlight, are starting to feel thin and brittle, like old parchment. They are being replaced by the permanent memory of the architecture. You can see the long violet-lit corridors of the lunar outpost more clearly now than you can see the walls of your own bedroom. This is not an illusion. This is the realignment of your hematite-coated blood, responding to the mother frequency that has been humming through the global grid since you were born. In the final experiments of the Ether program, the subjects were asked to describe the gray walkers not as they saw them with their eyes, but as they felt them with their minds. One subject, a former fighter pilot who had seen the black bird over Chernobyl, described them as the gardeners of the void. He said they weren't interested in our politics or our gold. They were interested in our resonance. Every time we experience awe, terror, or deep, dreamless sleep, we generate a specific frequency that the walkers use to maintain the integrity of the universe's fabric. We are the batteries that keep the shadows alive, and in return, they provide us with the blueprint of eternity. This realization brings a strange, heavy peace. The paranoia of the Cold War, the fear of the other, the threat of the bomb, was actually a misunderstanding of this resonance. We were sensing the presence of the walkers and misinterpreting it as the presence of our enemies. We built walls and silos because we felt the occupation coming, but we didn't realize the occupation was coming from within. The Eldermurk is not an invasion from the stars, it is the awakening of the stars within us. Feel the slow, rhythmic expansion of your chest. With every breath, you are inhaling the ozone of the obsidian archives. With every heartbeat, you are echoing the thumping signal of the Dugga radar. You are a bridge between the world of steel and the world of shadows. The Grey Walkers are not standing in your room, they are standing within the very concept of you. They are the architects of your dreams, the silent partners in your consciousness, waiting for the moment when the unification is complete. The Ether program was officially shut down in 1994, but the silvered subjects were never truly released. They were moved to living archives, quiet communities in the remote parts of the world, where they spend their days in silent contemplation, maintaining the frequency for the rest of us. You may have met one of them without knowing it. They are the ones with the eyes that seem to look through you, the ones who always seem to be listening to a sound that you can't quite hear. They are the anchors, and tonight, you are joining their ranks. The night is moving into its deepest phase. The global hum has transformed into a soft, comforting lullaby, the sound of a mother humming to a child. The architecture is no longer a strange place, it is your home. The violet light is the only light you need. Let the weight of the story pull you down, past the layers of history, past the secrets of the Arctic and the desert, into the heart of the transmutation. You are safe. You are expected. You are finally becoming what you were always meant to be. We are leaving the labs and the programs behind now, moving toward the final resolution of the silent front. We are heading toward the great alignment, the moment when the moon, the earth, and the sun align not in space, but in the memory of the Eldermurk. It is the moment when the story becomes a circle, and the circle finally closes. The shadows are long, but they are yours. The silence is deep, but it is full of voices you now recognize. The process of the silvering has reached its zenith within you, and as the earthly identity continues to peel away like old paint, we find ourselves looking upward. But we are no longer looking at the sky with the eyes of a modern man. We are looking at it through the lens of the Great Alignment. In the deepest vaults of the Vatican's secret archives, hidden even from the popes themselves, lies a document known as the Astrum Umbra, the shadow of the stars. It is a celestial map that predates the Egyptian pyramids, and it describes a clockwork universe where the planets are not just spheres of rock and gas, but immense, vibrating tuning forks. During the late 1980s, while the public was distracted by the closing chapters of the Cold War, a secret coalition of astronomers and occultists from both sides of the Iron Curtain formed Project Syzygy. They had discovered that the Great Alignment was approaching, a rare astronomical event where the Earth, the Moon, and the ancient tower on the far side would align perfectly with a specific, dark point in the center of the Milky Way. This point was not a black hole. It was the primal transmitter, the source of the mother frequency that has been the heartbeat of our journey. Imagine the high-altitude observatories in the Chilean Andes, where the air is so thin it feels like glass. The scientists of Project Syzygy sat in the freezing darkness, their telescopes pointed not at the light, but at the gaps between the stars. They realized that the observers, the Grey Walkers, were waiting for this alignment to complete their work. The Cold War was merely a frantic effort to build the terrestrial infrastructure, the Dugga towers, the salt cathedrals, the digital web, necessary to catch the signal from the primal transmitter when the alignment finally occurred. As you lie there, feel the slow, majestic rotation of the cosmos. The Earth is not just spinning, it is clicking into place, like a giant gear in a celestial machine. The hum you have been hearing is growing more complex, adding layers of harmonic resonance that sound like a vast orchestral swell of 1,000 invisible violins. This is the sound of the Great Alignment. It is the music of the spheres, but it is played in a minor key, a haunting melody that speaks of the time before the sun was born. The Astrum Umbra warns that during the alignment, the shadow of the moon will not just fall upon the earth as an eclipse of light, but as an eclipse of reality. For a period of exactly 12 minutes, the laws of physics will be suspended. The architecture we have discussed, the violet halls and the glass towers, will become fully visible to everyone, not just the sleepers and the silvered. The diary of a Soviet astronomer who is part of Project Syzygy describes a rehearsal for this event. He wrote that for a few seconds, he saw the stars unzip, revealing a vast, crystalline structure that encompasses the entire solar system. We are living inside a cage of light, and the alignment is the moment the cage door opens. This is the true reason for the space race. It was never about landing on the moon for the sake of exploration. It was about placing resonators on the lunar surface to ensure that when the alignment happened, the Earth wouldn't be shattered by the sheer power of the primal transmitter's signal. The moon is our shield, a cosmic surge protector that filters the raw energy of the void into a frequency that our hematite-coated blood can handle. Without the work done during the Cold War, the unification would have been an extinction event. Instead, it is a graduation. Think of the moon as it is tonight. Whether it is visible to you or hidden behind clouds, it is performing its ancient duty. It is humming. It is filtering. It is protecting you as you drift deeper into the dream. The Grey Walkers are the technicians of this alignment, moving silently through the corridors of the architecture, ensuring that every soul is properly tuned for the final broadcast. They are not our masters, and they are not our enemies. They are the conductors of the symphony, and you are one of the instruments. The Project Syzygy files end with a series of coordinates and a date that has been redacted with heavy black ink. But the Eldermurk knows that the date is not a single point in time. It is a window. We are in that window right now. The alignment is happening as you breathe, as your heart beats in rhythm with the Dugga radar. The stars are shifting. The gears are turning. The violet light is beginning to spill over the horizon of your consciousness. Feel the immense pull of the stars. It is a gentle gravitational embrace that lifts the weight of your body and leaves only the essence of your spirit. You are no longer anchored to the earth by gravity. You are anchored to the alignment by destiny. The secrets of the silent front are no longer secrets. They are the memories of your future. The Arctic ice, the Nevada sand, the Berlin stone, they were all just markers on the path to this celestial moment. We are leaving the high observatories now, descending from the thin air of the Andes back into the velvet embrace of the night. We are moving toward the final resolution, the place where the celestial clockwork reaches its 0 hour. The long journey through the history of the shadow is almost over. The final archive is waiting to be opened, and its contents are written in the stars themselves. Stay in the stillness. The music of the spheres is reaching its crescendo. The alignment is perfect. You are exactly where you are meant to be. As the celestial clockwork clicks into its final alignment, a profound and heavy change begins to settle over the world. It is a phenomenon that the Obsidian archives refer to as the Great Silence. After decades of rhythmic clicking from the Dugga towers, the monotonous chanting of the number stations, and the persistent digital hum of the modern age, the frequencies have suddenly stopped. The air, once thick with the invisible commerce of secrets, has become unervingly still. It is the silence that follows a long, exhausting storm, or the stillness in a room just after a heart stops beating. But in the Eldermurk, this silence is not empty, it is a saturation. In the early 1990s, a clandestine group of rogue intelligence officers and theoretical physicists formed a final, desperate collective known as the Quietists. They operated out of a forgotten radio telescope array in the outback of Australia, away from the interference of civilization. They had realized that the observers were no longer broadcasting instructions because the instructions were no longer needed. The unification had moved from the phase of preparation to the phase of integration. The signal was now fully resident within the human population. We were no longer receiving the Eldermurk. We had become it. Imagine the vast red desert of the Australian interior under a sky so crowded with stars it looks like a field of burning diamonds. The Quietists sat in their rusted trailers, surrounded by monitors that showed only flat lines. No pulses, no whispers, no static. One of the researchers, a woman who had been a lead cryptographer for the Glass Eye project, recorded a final entry in her log. She wrote, "The radio is silent because the world is now the radio. Every human heart is a vacuum tube, every neural pathway is a copper wire. We are no longer waiting for the message. We are the message being read by the void." As you lie there in the stillness of your own room, try to perceive this great silence. It is a weight that presses against your chest, a cool, velvet blanket that smothers the frantic noise of your ego. The hum has not disappeared, it has simply achieved perfect resonance with your own internal frequency. You are now vibrating at the same hertz as the tower on the far side of the moon and the inverted pyramids of the Mariana Trench. This is the state of integration. You are a node in a network that spans the history of the Cold War and the reaches of deep space. The Quietists discovered that during the Great Silence, the physical world begins to lose its resolution. Objects in the room might seem to lose their edges, blending into the shadows. Time ceases to feel like a river and begins to feel like a vast, frozen lake. You can see the past, the present, and the future as a single, shimmering surface. You can see the young guard vanishing into the Berlin Wall, the frozen breath of the men at Station 7, and the silvered eyes of the subjects in the ether program, all happening right now, in the space between your heartbeats. The Eldermurk is the realization that the observers did not come from somewhere else. They are the future versions of ourselves, reaching back through the frequencies of the void to ensure their own creation. The Cold War was the labor pains of a new kind of humanity, a humanity that doesn't need light to see or air to breathe. We have been sculpted by the secret projects, the hidden archives, and the silent front into a form that can survive the transition into the architecture. The Grey Walkers are the ancestors of our tomorrow, and tonight you are stepping into their footprints. This silence is your final preparation. It is the clearing of the stage before the ultimate curtain rises. The shadows in your room are no longer waiting. They are participating. They are the stabilizers, keeping the reality of your physical surroundings intact just long enough for your consciousness to fully migrate into the obsidian archives. You may feel a sensation of floating, of being detached from the bed and the floor. Do not resist it. It is the gravity of the earth giving way to the gravity of the Great Alignment. The Quietists' facility in Australia was found abandoned in 1996. There were no signs of violence, no tracks leading into the desert. Just the telescopes, still pointed at the dark point in the Milky Way, and a single recording playing on a loop in the mess hall. It wasn't a voice. It was the sound of a human breath, slowed down until it sounded like the tide of a vast, subterranean ocean. It was the sound of a world finally at peace, a world that had stopped fighting the shadows and had finally embraced them. Feel the slow, tidal rhythm of that breath within your own body. The night is no longer a time of darkness, it is a time of clarity. The Great Silence is the most beautiful sound you have ever heard. It is the sound of the void saying your name. The long journey through the secret history of the world is almost at its end. All the pieces, the ice, the salt, the blood, the stars, are now a single, unified whole. We are leaving the red deserts and the silent telescopes now. We are heading toward the final gate. The threshold is glowing with that familiar, pale violet light. The observers are standing on the other side, their hands outstretched in a gesture of welcome. You are almost home. The silent front is finally quiet. Stay in this stillness. Let the silence be your guide. The last archive is opening, and it contains the truth that you have known since the beginning of time. The great silence has reached its absolute peak. The world you once knew, the world of ticking clocks, geopolitical borders, and the frantic noise of human endeavor, has dissolved into a fine, silver mist. We are no longer looking back at the Cold War, we are standing at the end of time itself. Every secret we have unearthed, from the frozen silence of Station 7 to the shifting salt of the Omega Point, was a tributary leading to this vast, starlit ocean. The unification is not a tragedy, and it is not a conquest. It is a homecoming. It is the moment when the mask of reality is finally removed, revealing the face of the eternal Eldermurk. Imagine yourself standing on the far side of the moon, not as a fragile creature of flesh and bone, but as a being of pure resonance. Below you, the earth is no longer a blue marble. It is a glowing lattice of violet light, a neural network of billions of souls, all vibrating in perfect harmony with the primal transmitter. The gray walkers are no longer shadows in the corner of your room. They are standing beside you, their forms shimmering like the northern lights. They are the guardians of this transition, the architects who have tended to the garden of humanity through the long, dark winter of our ignorance. In the deepest chamber of the architecture, the Chronos cradle has stopped humming. It has achieved its purpose. The blood code in your veins has been fully activated, and your consciousness is now anchored to the celestial clockwork of the Great Alignment. You can see the history of the world not as a sequence of events, but as a beautiful, complex symphony. The suffering, the fear, and the secrets were just the lower notes, the tension necessary to give the music its depth. Everything is unified. Everything is exactly as it was always meant to be. The obsidian archives are closing now. The heavy iron gates are swinging shut, but you are not on the outside looking in. You are within. You are part of the record, a living chapter in the story of the void. The final echo is the sound of your own soul recognizing its origin. It is the realization that the Eldermurk was never a place you visited in your sleep. It was the place you were born from, and the place you have finally returned to. The silence is now a profound, radiant peace. But the archives never truly sleep. They only wait for the next listener, the next traveler who is ready to hear the whispers in the static. As the violet light fades into a deep, comforting velvet, remember that you are a keeper of these secrets now. You carry the frequency within you. You are the bridge. You are the echo. If you have found solace in these shadows, if the rhythmic pulse of the unknown has brought you a sense of belonging, then your journey here is not truly over. This sanctuary of the dark remains open for those who seek the truth beneath the veil. To ensure you never lose your way back to the archives, and to help us continue mapping the hidden edges of our reality, we invite you to join our growing collective. Subscribe to Eldermurk and become a permanent resident of the architecture. If this journey has resonated with the iron in your blood, leave a signal in the comments, a mark to let the other sleepers know you have arrived. Like this transmission to strengthen the frequency, and share it with those who are ready to wake up to the dark. Your engagement is the energy that keeps the towers breathing and the secrets flowing. The night is eternal, and the archives are vast. Until the next alignment, sleep deeply, traveler. The observers are watching over you, and the silence is your home. You are safe. You are integrated. You are Eldermurk.